And here we are once again, off trail with Luke and Chandler. I'm Luke.
I'm Chandler.
And we're off trail.
Yes, we are.
So today, Chandler, I understand that you have a bit of a bone to pick with me.
Yes, I do.
Tell me about this.
I'm angry.
Oh.
I'm frustrated.
Oh, man.
I'm upset.
Mm.
Yeah. I am so mad that you're so much of a better portrait photographer than me. And
I can't help it, dude.
I don't know why. I can't figure it out. You know, we were talking about this the other day. To be serious here. We were sitting up in the office. We were talking about some shots. It was some shots that you got of Travis.
Yeah, when I went
you went downtown
with him and Ashton.
Yeah. And you were showing me some of these shots that you got, and I was just like, why can't I figure this out? You know, I started off photography, doing landscape stuff, as do, a lot of different people. And you had a very different start than most people do, which kind of puts you into a different bracket almost than other people. Like it gives you a different specialty. And it's one that I haven't had a lot of experience in, and that's portraits. And I mean, not to sit here and just, stroke your ego.
Do it.
But your portraits are phenomenal.
Thanks, bro.
And I can't seem to figure it out, It's a little bit frustrating because it's like I want to take portraits and I want to take good portraits, because the ones I see that you take, like I said, they're great. But I can't seem to figure it out. I've tried it, and every time I get back, from wherever we're shooting, and I look at some of the photos that I've gotten, I'm like, they're not Luke Furman quality portraits. And yeah, it's a little obnoxious, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, it's different than shooting landscapes.
Very different.
Like, it's totally different,
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm lucky. I really do think I'm incredibly lucky that I started in portraits,
Mm-hmm.
because I think landscapes are much easier to pick up
Yes.
than portraits. And I definitely have my good friend Olivia Shively to thank for that. Shout out to her,
Mm-hmm.
my forever favorite photographer. She took me under her wing when I started getting into photography, and I was helping her with some portrait sessions, some weddings, and just the first thing I did.
Yeah.
And I lived in the Midwest in Indiana at the time, and there's no landscapes to shoot.
No, just corn.
Yeah, there's only so many ways you can shoot a cornfield.
Yep.
So, portraits out there, it's just, I don't know, more of the norm, maybe?
Yeah, it's a little more accessible.
Yeah,
So-
like you don't have the mass of photographers doing the outdoor landscape adventure stuff, because that kind of thing just doesn't really exist there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started in portraits and learned how to shoot with people,
Mm-hmm.
in my frame, and not landscapes. But then you move out here and it's like, oh yeah, I'll just go down there, take a landscape shot. And I feel like you pick it up pretty quick.
Yeah.
How to make things better, a lot easier. It doesn't-
Yeah.
Now, it takes practice, to do landscapes too, but like, I feel like there's not as many things to work with, You
Mhm.
show up to a landscape, you just wait for the sun to be in the right spot and take your photo.
Yeah, wait for the light, find your composition.
Yeah,
and-
get a decent composition, but
Not that
like I
there's
said,
not technical aspects.
yeah, there's
to
still
it, but-
things you need to learn, but like,
Yeah.
it's just waiting for the right moment and boom, done.
Mhm.
Whereas like a portrait, you have a whole other person that you're working with.
Yeah.
And that not just you need to take a photo of, but you need to make them look good.
Yeah.
And that's a hard skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one that you have to, really practice on. And it's not like you can just go out in the middle of nowhere and take a portrait. You need someone with you too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times for people, it's clients, but we're fortunate we have friends
Yeah.
that we can do this with. And I truly love being like maybe the most portrait centered person
Mm-hmm.
on a lot of the things we get out and do, because I get to go through my Lightroom and see, a whole folder of awesome photos of our friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, it's more meaningful to me.
Mhm.
Yeah, like that's Travis.
it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's Scott,
Yeah.
like it's a really cool thing for me to get to see, and I really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, portraits they're just different, and
100%.
a lot of people they don't practice as
Mhm.
much as they should to do really good ones. And there's a difference too, I'd like to point out, between like what I do and what a lot of regular portrait photographers or wedding photographers do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're doing more couples things, whatever. And a lot of that to me is more scripted,
Mm-hmm.
where you have like a set thing of poses and stuff you're just walking through.
Yeah.
And not that you're taking the same photo of every couple you're doing stuff with, but like you're kind of doing that in a way. You have a template to work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas what I get to go out and do, it's like, hey, let's look at this scene. Where can I put you? And hope there's something there.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
in a way, that might train me a little better because it's harder to do that. I don't know what I'm going to have at my disposal. And, you know, a lot of times we go out and, you know, people aren't all dressed to the nines looking nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which definitely helps in a lot of portraiture. It's like, hey, like I'm just wearing a hoodie and some, you know, regular pants on a hike. And it's like, you know, got to make someone look good.
Yeah.
And that adds to the difficulty.
Yeah.
But there's definitely ways you can, you know, get better. And we're going to go through some examples today.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a good little list of different examples of your photos. You know, that we've gone through, and we've kind of narrowed a lot of them down as photos that are good examples of different points and things to look for in portrait photography and stuff. And, you know, this is, you know, hopefully this will be a little bit of an educational episode for some people. It's definitely going to be one for me because I am not as familiar with this kind of photography, and it's something that I want to be better at. And so hopefully for anybody out there, it'll be educational as well.
Yeah.
So.
And, you know, and by no means, like, am I saying like I'm the best one out there at this stuff. It's just, I think maybe what, I don't know, sets my stuff apart from the other people we do stuff with is like, no one really tries to do this.
Yeah.
Because they just want to do landscape stuff. Where when we're out, I will be like, hey, can you come stand over here? And I'm basically right next to you shooting a true portrait of you.
Yeah.
And so like people just don't do that. They don't see it. And so like I'm kind of the only one that is doing some of that.
Yeah. I definitely like I have to work for seeing something like this. You know, I can go out, I can pick a landscape out, piece of cake. Like that's not difficult for me at all.
And I would say you're better than me at that, doing landscapes. But like again, just role reversal. Like I'm just better at portraits than than most people are. And so it's different way of seeing things.
Yeah, and like you said, it's just lots of practice and stuff.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, all the shots that we're going to show up today were done on my 50 millimeter lens. Like,
which that's a good thing to maybe start talking about a little bit. Is you know, one thing that leads to good portrait photography is lens choice. You know, there's the saying that goes around, you know, gear doesn't matter and whatnot, but there does come a point where the right gear can definitely help you improve.
Portrait photography, definitely, you can be very helped by the gear.
Yeah,
because it's all about your aperture. You know, and a lot of these you're going to see, a shallower depth of field. And that can really only be achieved by certain lenses.
Yes.
Like if you go get like your 15 to 35 f4, you literally cannot get this look.
Yeah.
You know, like you can.
Yeah.
You know, you can't be shooting on f8 for any of these things.
Yeah.
A lot of these I'm shooting anywhere in between f1.2 and I don't know, f2, f2.4, whatever.
Yeah.
That, you know?
Yeah.
But you have to have the right kind of lens for that. You know, a nifty 50, a 50 millimeter f1.8 cheap lens, like that's a decent one to start with.
Yeah.
But a lot of portrait photographers really like prime lenses. You know, the 35, the 50, the 85, those are 3 common lengths. And they make all of those typically in very, wide aperture lens. But like you do have to kind of try out that stuff. Because if you're not shooting shallow enough, like you're going to have the entire thing in focus and, you know, it doesn't separate your subject much.
Yeah.
So that's how you create certain styles like this. But like, I think there's a very real conversation to be had that as you shoot more and more, again, for me, with the 50 millimeter lens, you literally begin to just see the world through that lens. Like the 50 is my baby. It's my favorite lens to use. You know, I don't use it much for landscape, but for portraits, it's great. But like when I'm out, I generally know how far away or what angle I need to be to get the exact frame I want before I even bring the camera out.
Yeah.
Like I can see it lined up before I'm like even trying to shoot it.
Yeah.
But that's because I've used it so much.
Yeah. You did a whole 50-50 challenge.
Yeah. We can talk about that someday.
Yeah.
But like it's a real thing. Like once you start to shoot more with it, you start to learn like how things look.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for portraits, you have to make people look good. You begin to really see like how people look in your frame and what you can do to make them look better.
Yeah.
But if you're just like, I think the best example of this is before I got my 50, I was shooting with a 24-70, and 24-70, great lens. A lot of people use it.
Yeah.
You know, very versatile.
It's one that I use. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a ton of people use that lens. But I think one of the things that hurts people in trying to maybe transition to portraits is in using a lens like that, you have like ultimate freedom to do whatever. And so you don't have to really work and think about where you need to be in order to set up a shot. And plus, most often, like that lens only goes to f2.8, which is, for me, it's right on the cusp of being good for one-person shots.
Yes. Yep.
Like, I'd rather be a touch lower.
Yeah.
But if you have two people or like family stuff, 2.8 is pretty good.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, when I try to shoot with 2.8, it's you know, I try to do that so I can get a similar look as to what you're getting. But even still at 2.8,
you just can't.
It just can't. Yeah.
And that's why like I recommend the Nifty 50, because at f1.8, like you can start getting some of this. The bokeh is not as buttery as mine is.
Yeah.
But that's why I paid top dollar for this lens.
Yeah.
You know? But like that's a real thing. Like you have to kind of get the right gear and really use it to understand how to put good frames together with people. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's just practice. I mean, there is something to be said about the kind of freedom that you get from limiting yourself. It just kind of helps you work through things so much more creatively.
Yeah,
And,
it like forces you
Yeah.
to. Because that's why I got my 50 in the first place.
Yeah.
It was when I was using my 24-70, I just was not liking the stuff that I was getting.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Maybe I was just not great back then, which could be the case. But then I sold that to get my 50. And it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
You know, not financially, but it was the best thing I ever
I'm
did.
sure you've recovered now.
Yeah, but like it really forced me to start, you know, working harder for my shots and not being lazy.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the best things you can do for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you have a 24-70, by all means, just lock it into something and try to just work with that.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, this is something that I've tried to do on mine, and I found that I have a hard time doing it. Like I'll put mine to 50, and I didn't, you know, from a landscape photography perspective, 50 millimeters is kind of an awkward. It's an awkward focal length. You know, usually I'm trying to get really pushed in, or I'm trying to get really wide, and like 50 is just kind of awkward.
You have to have the right scenario.
Yeah.
You know, because especially like in my case, I have the prime. You have the range,
The variable one. Yeah.
But like with the prime one, especially, if you can't move to the right spot that you need to be in for the shot,
You're just not
you're
getting.
kind of
You're not getting
SOL.
that shot.
Like
yeah.
you can't get it. But if you have the range, you can at least play with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, you can test things out. You don't have to, you know, commit to a big lens like mine. You can
Yeah.
force yourself to, you know, learn on one thing, but you have to be a little more disciplined about it.
Yeah. And for a little clarification, just so you know, for clarification, there are two. What we're talking about, there are two 50 millimeter prime lenses for Canon. There is what you have is the RF 50 millimeter 1.2 aperture, which is like it's the big hefty guy.
It's magic.
It's a pretty penny, you know, to get it. I don't know how much is it. 2,500.
It was like 2,300 when I got it, maybe.
Yeah. It's a little bit, but you definitely pay for what you get.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
the bokeh is beautiful. The depth is great. It's a phenomenal lens. It's so sharp.
When I was looking to buy it, Dave at Picture Line, he was telling me, he's like, this thing is magic. Like it's an amazing lens.
Yeah.
Like the bokeh is butter. And I was like, I need to see this.
Yeah. And
so I got it, and Dave, spot on.
Yeah.
You were right. Best purchase I made in photography.
So good. Yeah, so then there's that one, and then there's also the, you know, what a lot of people refer to as the Nifty 50, which is the 50 millimeter 1.8. It's like the little teeny one.
Yeah, it's cheap. It's like $150.
That's like it's super cheap. Super
I got it
good
right
for,
away when I started photography. I was like, oh, let's try this.
I did too, actually. So
Yeah.
it was one of the first ones that, I had heard a lot of people say, like, you want to get a nifty 50. So I was like, okay, I'll get one. And like a month after getting my camera, I picked one up. It's like $100.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that there is a difference. There are the two, 50 millimeter prime lenses with Canon. So
and there's other third-party stuff, other brands. There's a lot of other
there's,
things.
There's a lot.
But like we're Canon guys, that's just what we know, and,
Mhm.
and that's why we bring that distinction up.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Okay. So we have a couple different aspects to portrait photography, as we
Mhm.
mentioned, that we kind of wanted to go through. And then we have all of our examples. So I think we just start at the top of our little list here and
let's do it.
kind of start talking about, talk about these different photos and what kind of aspects were brought into them to make them as good as they are. So
I like it.
I think the first one we want to talk about is the concept of depth and why depth is important in portrait photography, in all photography. But
Yeah, it is.
specifically
Even
in portrait
in
photography.
landscapes, it's important too.
Yeah.
But with portraits, like the reason depth is important is because it allows you to hone in on your subject
Hmm.
and really bring the focus to them. If you can't, introduce an element of depth, it's hard to really distinguish the subject from the scene and what you should really be bringing your eye to. And this is primarily done with your aperture in your lens. That's why we talked about then, like
Mhm.
a lot of portrait photographers like to shoot below f2.8
Mhm.
because it allows you to bring your background or your foreground either a little bit more or very much so out of focus, but keep your subject, the person, in focus.
Mhm.
That's why all these we're showing you on, they're in that range between f1.2 and like f2, f2.2, whatever I shot at.
Yeah.
But I do that because I want you to basically only look at the subject.
Mhm.
I don't want you to look at anything else in the scene but the one I'm trying to direct you to.
Yes.
And that's done primarily through aperture.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I think, let's see, what is a good example here to start with for depth? You think that one's good?
I think that's great.
Okay. So we have this shot. We'll put it up here on the screen. It's this shot that Luke got last month. We were doing our little photo challenge. If you haven't watched that video, go watch it. We were up in the mountains and we were up shooting in the snow and stuff. And I was having a conversation with Scott Osborne, and you were off to the side trying to frame up a shot, with me between Scott's like camera and his head and stuff, and looks super cool. But I don't know, why don't you talk about like kind of what you were thinking about when you were taking this shot as far as like capturing depth and how you did that?
Yeah. So you'll see this element in a lot of my portraits.
Yeah.
It's
This is
just-
pretty much in all of them. This one, there
This
are a few
one's-
where it's more prominent.
Yes, and
So-
this is one of those.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you're going to see that in a lot of them.
Mhm.
A lot of times I like to joke. It's like I'm just going to stick my camera in a bush
Mhm.
and shoot through the bush, of my subject. But like in this one, there wasn't a great spot to put like a bush in front of you or anything like that. But I did have Scott, and I think it's something that you can kind of keep in mind when you're out shooting portraits. Like you can use the other people around you to help get other portraits of different people. In this one, I decided, like there's actually a neat little nook in between like where his arm is sitting right there. And if I get my camera at the right angle, like a little bit lower,
Mhm.
I can shoot up and get your face, your head, right in the middle of the frame, but framed up with Scott's body around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it also creates a little bit of an interesting contrast with the background
Mhm.
because the background's white, there's trees back there.
Mhm.
And so the background is different, it helps you stand out from that, but then the foreground also does the same thing.
Mhm.
But then having Scott, a person, be the foreground in this too, almost adds another element. It's like there was some kind of community there, like some engagement with another person, some
Yeah.
social aspect.
There's a story to it.
Yeah, like you're
Yeah.
having a conversation.
Yeah.
And so it adds to the photo.
Mhm.
But if I just remove Scott from this, I mean, it actually would almost maybe still be a decent shot of you.
Mhm.
But it's just like you standing there, just kind of looking blank.
Yeah.
but you can add something to obscure you just a little bit that kind of lets you know, okay, like you're kind of this far away from the camera, all that kind of stuff. So like that's what I saw there. But like you just have to kind of play with it. Like I wasn't intending on that day coming in like, oh, I'm going to put Scott in front of Chandler and shoot photo of Chandler. It's like, okay, looking around like, what can I do? There's no branches, there's no bushes. Like, I'm going to use Scott.
Yep.
And I've started to do this a little bit more with people while we're out because we get groups, and so you always have other people at your disposal. So it's like, hey, like people are talking, like I'm just gonna get behind someone, frame the person who's talking up over the shoulder of the person in between me and them, and I'll use them as a little framing block. You know?
Yeah.
It's a great technique that you can use. You'll see maybe I don't know, maybe another one like that, but another one, you know, from that same day is this one of Scott. Same exact concept. I'm going to put something in front of my subject. In this case, it was 2 tree branches.
This was a tree, yeah.
Yeah, like one on the bottom, one on the top. And it makes for just a neat looking shot.
Yeah.
You know, it adds a little bit of depth to the scene that you wouldn't otherwise have without those. Now, because I'm using a lens that I can shoot at a low aperture, like I have some of the depth no matter what, because at the focal distance that I'm working with, like the background's going to be out of focus no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going to be perfectly sharp. It's not going to be just nothing, but it will be fuzzy. So I have some of that already to help Scott, in this case, stand out from that.
Yeah.
But by putting something else in front, it just adds another element of that to separate and add now 3 layers to a photo as opposed to just 2. So it's just another neat little way you could do that. But I do this all the time.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just go find a bush or a tree and put my camera in front of it and have someone walk in front of me.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
You know, there's another good example. This shot of our friend Nick Haley when we were downtown.
I like this
shooting
shot.
with
This
Travis
is a cool shot.
and Ashton. You know, it's funny because this was almost an accident.
Yeah.
You know, I was trying to take this photo of the door, trying to frame it up there. And just so the people at home know, I'm actually shooting through like a bank of scooters downtown.
Which is funny. You almost don't. I think the only thing that gave it away from me
Like a little
was
brake bar.
It looks like the brake bar.
Yeah. But I'm shooting through like a scooter, right? Which is like, who thinks to try to do that? But I'm like, hey, I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
You know? But I was trying to shoot a photo of the door. And then Nick Haley walks through my frame unknowingly. And I saw him like, oh, you come back right now.
Yeah.
You need to stand right there. And that's how we got this shot. You know, I posed her up, but like, that's how we got the shot.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it adds something to the photo.
Yeah.
If it was just her in the middle of the sidewalk with nothing in front of her, it'd be a little bit more boring.
It would. Yeah.
But this just adds something that makes it more interesting, that draws you in. And in this case, it's almost like a vignette in a way.
It does,
but not done with lighting.
Yeah.
It's done with other elements in the frame that were
Yes.
actually present in the scene. And it's just a unique way to bring focus to a subject. And that's why I do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, and that's something that I've tried to play with it here and there is, you know, using people's shoulders or things like that to try to create something like that. And it's interesting, actually. We were talking about these photos, actually, and talking about, you know, putting stuff in front of your camera to shoot around and stuff. And I had shown you a photo that I got a couple weeks ago of our friend Carl. And I may have actually been using you, like your shoulder or something, as a foreground element and stuff. And I was like, well, I did this here, you know, like this is what you know, an example. And it was like, yeah, it's close, you know, you're putting that example or you're using this concept, but it's like, it's not quite there, you know. It's like, just because you're using it doesn't mean it's quite there yet. But yeah, it's just looking for all these, you know, all these different things. So
yeah. And, you know, when you had showed me your portrait attempts from that day, you know, like, like they're just okay.
Yeah.
And then it almost immediately said like, dude, I have basically the same shots.
Yeah.
Like what people don't realize is like, yeah, I have all these really good ones.
Yeah.
But
you got to go to the crappy ones.
Yeah. Like at the same time, I took a bunch of crappy ones.
Yeah.
those days.
Yeah.
And you guys don't see those photos because I delete them.
Yeah.
But I work through a bunch of different ideas when I'm out shooting to get to the really good one.
Yeah.
And that's when you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't get there unless I'm playing around. So like all those ones you shot, I got those too.
Yeah.
But then I just slightly start tweaking those. And now it's like, okay, now we're talking. And oh, this is it.
Yeah.
You find it. But if you don't allow yourself to do that and to play around, how do you expect to possibly find the perfect shot?
Yeah, no, you can't. And that's the thing is that, you know, that kind of helped something click with me where it was like, okay, so like I'm in the right direction. I'm in the right direction. It's just a matter of like taking it a step forward and like actually going through with it. You know, this is a process that I go through with landscapes where it's like I take a bunch of photos and stuff and it's like, they're not that great. But then I finally like land on one that's what I think is good. So it's just a process.
Yeah, like it's the same concept as landscape. It's the same concept as anything you're ever trying to learn. You have to practice it and just keep pushing and you know, playing with the boundaries of what you think might look good and what doesn't. And if you're not exploring, you're never going to actually add things to your tool belt.
Exactly.
Like you have to just keep at it, and eventually it's going to come. I've been doing that since I started shooting portraits. You know, so I've been doing this for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of experience trying to do all this portrait stuff. You don't do much of that at all.
Yeah. No.
Like you're just starting, even though you've been shooting for basically that same amount of time. You haven't been doing stuff with people.
Yes.
And so you have to just keep playing with it. Like anyone is that same way. You know, it's going to take practice, just like anything you ever do. I was a volleyball coach before I got into this whole life.
Yeah.
And like, same thing. If I'm teaching you how to serve or how to spike, you got to just keep practicing.
Yep.
You can't expect it just to come without ever doing anything for yourself.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So practice makes perfect.
Before we move on, we're going to just quickly reset our cameras. Is that one good?
Yep, we're good.
Perfect. Okay. There's one more, I think, in here that we should talk about with depth. It's this one.
This is a good one, yeah.
This one is of my friend back at home in Illinois, Esther Thompson, the family that lived behind us in our neighborhood. We were just out one day, just, you know, walking around, and I had her lay down on a park picnic table.
This is on a table?
That's on a picnic table.
That's funny.
But you can kind of see, like, that's the lines,
I can see it,
the tabletop, right? But it, like, this is a great example of depth because with the angle my camera is at, basically sitting on the table, and with her being on top of it, it allows you to kind of gradually get into the scene as it starts to get in focus, and then you've hit the target, the subject. Whereas if I had a higher aperture, which is, and this is why I can do this because I shot on a low aperture. If I had a higher aperture, everything's in focus, and so okay, it's still good, but it's not quite
where it could be.
It's not this, right?
Yeah.
And so having the right equipment allowed me to get this style of shot. And that's why, like, when I shoot, especially with portraits, it's like the first thing I'm setting is my aperture. Yeah. Because I want to control the style of my photo. Yeah. And aperture helps me do that.
Do you shoot on aperture priority, by the way? Or do
no, I'm on manual.
You're full manual. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but I was like...
No, I'm on manual, but aperture is almost always, even landscapes, the first thing I'm setting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm making sure that is set to the level that I want in order to achieve the style that I'm going for. In portraits, it's huge. Yeah. You know, and so that's how you get a shot like this, you know, regardless of all the posing. But, like, again, it's like you don't get this kind of shot unless you're like, hey, go lay on that table over there. Yeah. Like,
just about,
you got to try things. Yeah. Right? You know, I tried a handful of things with her that day, and I got a couple really good shots. You know, this being what I think is the second best from that day. Yeah. But, like, you know, it's just the way it is. Yeah. So this is the first best one that I got. I mean, I think it's one of the best portraits I've ever taken.
But I think it's stellar. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's largely because of our second topic that we want to talk about,
which is
lighting.
Yes.
Right. So this shot was, you know, around sunset. It wasn't, I don't know if it was quite at golden hour. I forget now because it was 2 years ago. Yeah. I don't know, whatever. But the lighting is really what makes this photo work
Hmm.
regardless of my edit on it. Like if I didn't have the right lighting, I couldn't achieve this look.
Yeah.
I still had my aperture and stuff. There's still the element of depth that you can work through the photo with. But that light hitting her face at that right angle allows you to play with shadows on the rest of her face
Hmm.
and then also behind her. And admittedly, I also brightened up parts of her hair to accentuate some of the lighting,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't work if I didn't have the right conditions.
Hmm.
And just like a couple other ones that we'll look at, this is an example of a time where I was like, I knew something was there
Hmm.
with the light. I just couldn't find it until I did.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep looking for it. There was another example. We actually don't have this photo in this set, but a portrait I got of our friend Isabel
Hmm.
down in southern Utah,
Yeah.
where we were underneath the little bridge and, we're like walking through a little creek or something. And she had walked out on the other side of the bridge. And I immediately knew, I'm like, there's something here.
Yeah.
Because when she just passed, like underneath like the wall of the bridge, kind of,
Hmm.
light hit her
Yeah.
in a very particular way. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And so then at that point, it's like, okay, I know the spot's right around here. Come stand here, move this way, like turn your head. And when you start to play like that, you get how that shot turned out, where it's just very small little patches of her face lit up
Hmm.
in a very unique way that makes for a really cool shot.
Yeah.
But you have to just look for those moments.
Yeah.
And that's what half the battle is with lighting. It's looking for that perfect lighting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of it too is, knowing how to form light on somebody's face, like what looks good. There's different like looking for Rembrandt lighting and things like that. There's a lot of different like styles to look for. So like researching into that stuff and, learning about what looks good and what different kind of, light shapes, emit different kinds of emotions and feelings and stuff in a photo.
Yeah. So like, let's go through a couple examples like that, right? No, let's stay on this one just real quick.
Okay.
So like, this is one where she's actually looking towards the light.
Mm-hmm.
And typically with portraits, you're ideally shooting backlit, which means the sun is behind you and the subject who you're shooting is kind of looking towards you, away from the light. And the reason you shoot backlit is because not all of the harsh light ends up hitting the subject's face.
Yeah.
And you avoid, bringing out some of the details in someone's face that don't look good, like more oils or, lines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want a harsh shadow line right across their nose, like, things like that. And so having them look away from the light allows you to have a nice, even look to their, not just face, but entire body.
Yeah.
And so it's much more pleasing in photos like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing to think about when you're out shooting.
Yeah. And I think another thing too, to kind of just to add another little, maybe a little element to kind of like, all these little tips, all these little, what would we call them? Concepts. They can all be used together.
Absolutely.
Light can create depth. And, one thing that backlighting somebody does is it gives them a hair light, gives them a little rim light. And that helps further separate them from the background, giving more depth. So,
and again, it's just all these things you got to play with.
Yeah.
But so in this photo, she's actually looking towards the light in the general direction. Again, it's closer to sunset, so it's not quite as harsh. The sun may have been slightly behind a couple objects. I don't know. But she's looking towards the light. Now, in this example, what this does is it allows the back of her head, her shoulder, to be shaded a little bit, which creates almost like depth in the sideways direction.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that, again, makes this a little bit better is adjusting my tone curve a little bit to soften the highlights. Takes away from some of the harshness that's on her face. Not that it was bad to begin with, but it gives me a little bit more flexibility to have her look into the light in this instance.
Yeah.
But typically, like, I'm not shooting much with, direct lighting on the face. It's always from behind.
Yeah.
When you're in the mountains and stuff covered by trees, it's not a big deal because it's really never a chance for direct light to come in. And I'm looking for like a shaded area generally. But in this case, like, we were a little exposed and that light comes in and hits her. But you can still work with it, like, which is really cool.
Yeah.
There's another example in here which I know you really like.
I do. I love this one.
And this is my shot of our friend Ramon when he
Yeah.
came to visit us last year. In around, I think, mid-March is when it was.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
took him down to southern Utah and had a blast.
Mm-hmm.
And we went into this area. It was a little slot canyon. And to be fair, I think personally it's really easy to get cool looking shots with lighting in slot canyons.
Yeah.
Like, as long as you're there at kind of the right time of day, like,
Yeah.
it's
like hard
easy.
to get bad stuff almost. Yeah.
Yeah, like lighting is really good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe you're looking for the right angle
Mm-hmm.
to get like the shot, which is what this one is. This might be one of my best portraits ever. Like, it
Yeah.
really is.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
But you know, we were in this slot canyon. The light kind of creeps in from above,
Mhm.
coming straight down, and he walks through that little section where the light hits, and I'm like, "Hey, move back, stand there." And I'm like, "I just need you to look up."
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he does. And then you move him around a little bit more, right? To get the right spot. But through all of that, you get this really neat light that just touches his face
Yeah.
in a very particular way that creates some drama
Mm-hmm.
and like some intrigue in a way, like, oh, it's just a really cool looking shot
Yeah.
that you can't get if you're working kind of just normal conditions.
Yeah. It's, you know, when I look at this photo, you know, because of the way that it's lit and because of, you know, that lighting in the background, everything, I am like, well, where is he?
Yeah.
Like, that looks cool.
It-
I don't know where that is, but I want to go there.
It creates like a mood around the entire scene.
Yeah.
This one, no, it's not like that. The mood like you're kind of talking about. This shot almost gives you like a hopeful vibe.
It does. Yeah,
Like,
it does.
it
Yeah.
inspires like hope, which
Yeah.
I had no intention on doing.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at it and you're like, oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, like with the lighting just spilling out over his face and then obviously down into his body a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a different kind of shot, but you have to look for that.
Yeah.
That very perfect spot to get this shot, you know, and you have to just keep working at it. But if you're not looking for it, you're not going to notice it.
Exactly.
And that's like when we're out, I'm constantly looking for things like this that like stick out to me. I'm like, oh, that's it right there. This is what we're shooting.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you get a cool shot like this. But again, you'll notice too, low aperture.
Yeah.
So I create some of that shallowness. The background's blurred out. The focus is just on the subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is where it should be.
Yep, exactly. This is kind of a funny shot too because I mean, I obviously, like we said, I love this shot. But I tried to replicate this one at one point.
Yeah.
I was on a little trip with Bryce Doherty. He came out here back in September, and we went down. And apparently, you know, through our conversations, it seems like it was in this exact same canyon.
It was, yes.
And same kind of thing happened. I saw this light come through, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to try to get my own version of this shot." And had the same, you know, had Bryce pose up similar to this, and I still am like it's not quite there, you know. I feel like I could have done better.
Yeah. You know, and like the thing is, if he was an inch in another direction, it wouldn't look the same.
Yeah, and part of that too was because I didn't have a 50 millimeter 1.2.
You know, I don't know if this was at 1.2. There's a good chance it was, or at least close.
Yeah.
But especially because like we were in the dark, so maybe it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a combination of right gear, right place, and just noticing the right frame.
Yep.
To put someone in.
Yeah.
It's just the way this works. That's how portraits work generally. At least again, how I approach portraits.
Yeah.
You know, with individuals out on like adventures and stuff. You have to be looking for the exact right frame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough because some places you get to, you're like, there is nothing for me to use here.
Yeah.
And that gets hard, you know? I'm not sure if we have another good example of lighting, but if not, I have a good example for what I would want to transition into. We do have one more for lighting. Let's go here first. So this shot is actually a very old shot. I shot this before I moved out here.
Yeah.
And this is my friend Stephen Thompson, brother to Esther, who we saw earlier. This was shot literally in just like what is basically a bedroom that
Yeah.
him and his family turned into a recording studio. And it's a really cool place, but we just turned out all the lights. I had literally one of these studio lights that we're using right now
Oh, really?
coming from the side, and I was just, hey, pose like this, boom, shot. And I edited it to kind of take some of the color, because there's like, I think some reds and blacks in the background. Like it's more colorful than you realize.
Yeah, I think I've seen the original. Yeah.
So I edited it for like color purposes to make it look like this, but like nonetheless, the lighting of it, like it adds to an element to this photo that is not normally there.
Yeah.
And that is like it covers basically half his face, and it creates some unique shadows like up in his eyes with his chin, like that you don't get unless you're playing around with lighting.
Yeah.
And this is from the direct side. This is not like 45-degree angle straight
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And so the more you can play with lighting, the more interesting subjects and scenes you're going to find and create. And that's just where like it just adds to your experience, so you can draw on that later, because this is basically the same kind of thing I found in the slot canyon.
Yeah.
Right? It's not an artificial source of light, but it's finding the beam of sunlight that comes through in a very particular way and using that to your advantage.
Yes.
But if you're not looking for that stuff, if you don't have experience with it, it's a lot harder. So you just got to jump into it and use it when you can and play with it. Even if the first things you do don't look good, just keep trying it and figure out something that might look good.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to make it look bad. Like, you're going to have to take those. Again,
Yeah.
I still take those too.
Yeah.
I just don't.
You're always going to.
I just don't show anyone those.
Yeah.
You know, that's the difference.
Yeah. You delete them as you
Yeah.
should.
So I think I was going to mention something about this, and I can't remember how I was going to transition into it now. But sometimes, like, you don't have like cool lighting like that, and so then it comes down to like this last aspect that we want to talk about, and that's posing. You know, sometimes you don't have the cool lighting, you don't have things you can put in the way of your subject. So now you got to get really creative. And this, admittedly, is probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
About portraits.
This is the part that I think I struggle with the most.
Yeah.
So
And it's posing.
yeah.
Posing.
Because this is where you actually make somebody look good.
Yes.
So
Posing is the most difficult part about portraits. And it's because you're working with an entire other person. And in order to make them look really good, you have to like get their body in a certain position, but then you also try to do that naturally, like make it look normal and not strictly pose like a robot.
Yeah.
But then you also have to try and capture some kind of emotion, which is not present in a landscape.
Yeah.
The landscape doesn't sit out there and, you know, give you a good smile.
Yeah. No.
It just sits there and you take a photo of it. But in this, you have to get the right look on someone's face, the right positioning with their hands, their feet, their shoulders, all of it. And if you mess up on one of those things, you've missed it.
Yep.
You know, and so you have to really work with this. So I think the best example, and frankly, it is one of my favorite shots I've ever taken, especially of you, because I am the best Chandler photographer there is.
This is true.
Is this shot here?
Even though I've recently replaced your.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that one. But this is when we went up to the Capitol.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get some cool photos up there that night. And we were, me, Kai, Taylor, and Hudson were just kind of chatting together, you know, 40 yards away from you, about maybe 50 yards, while you were looking like this, taking a photo of the Capitol. And I just happened to look over at you. And I was like, I need that shot.
Yeah.
And I yelled at him, like, and you started walking back. I'm like, no, Chandler,
Yeah,
stay.
Yeah.
And I ran
Like,
over
okay.
to you, and I said, get back down, do that same thing. And so I got you in this exact pose and took this shot. And the reason this works is because it looks like you're in the field taking the shot, which, again, you were basically in this exact pose.
Yeah.
And the way your face looks, like you're looking out towards your subject, you have a really good, like, epic adventurer stare, like off into the distance. And like it all comes together to make this really good photo. I use the element of depth with my lens to blur out the background, so only you are in focus.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in front of you. The lighting is just even, flat. It was cloudy that night, so like, no harsh lines, which was to my advantage.
Yeah.
But, otherwise, like, the only thing that makes this photo really is the posing.
Yeah.
And you have to look good in this shot. And
That's
you
true.
look great. Again, I think it's my favorite shot I've taken of you. And there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, that's true.
But this is, I think, the best one because you look like an outdoor photographer.
Yeah.
And it's really cool.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah. And it all comes down to posing. Like, that's what really sells your photos.
Mhm.
And we can find other good examples of this.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to this shot of our friend Derek when the three of us went downtown. And this was
It's like almost a
like
little over a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, December of 2021.
Yeah.
And what makes this one is that it looks very natural. And that's something that you could introduce into your photos with a very simple technique. It's just have people actually move in the shot.
Yeah.
So like this one, I told Derek, hey, stand out there, I don't know, 20 feet away from me, something like that, and literally just walk towards me.
Yeah.
And then I put my camera on continuous focus and just kept the focus on him as he moved. But in doing so, I'm capturing how he actually walks. And so it doesn't look forced, doesn't look robotic. It's just smooth and normal looking. And then you add in the element of depth and all the lights and stuff, and you get a cool looking photo. But if you're, a lot of times when people try posing, they say, hey, put your hand here, put your leg there, whatever it is.
Put your hand in your pocket.
And now it's like, oh, they just like go here and they just freeze.
Yeah.
And like the muscles are tense and you can tell in the photo. But if you have someone actually moving, it just allows the muscles to be relaxed and smooth moving, like when they're like you normally are in everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it helps just create a little bit more of a better vibe to it. And we can see this in a lot of things. So this photo of our friend Mike, a big thing in like wedding photography or other portraits is when they have like a nice suit jacket on is to have them grab their lapels. And in this, I didn't say, hey, grab your lapels and freeze.
Yeah.
I said, grab your lapels and kind of just tug on them.
Yeah.
Just very light motion like this allows you to actually be relaxed a little bit more as opposed to just like tight and frozen. Because a lot of people too, what you don't realize is you might tell them like, hey, do this. And now suddenly they've done it and they just freeze.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, am I doing this right? And like they're nervous and like it's just hard because they're not used to this. They can't just go like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, look this way and just relax.
Yeah.
They tense up. And so by just telling them like, hey, just like gently tug on your lapels, you get a shot that looks like this.
Yeah. He's super cool shot.
Yeah. And he's got a great stash too.
He does. Yeah.
But like, that's a good way to do it. This shot of our friend Hero, we're having him try on the Squatch hoodie for the first time. This is like the cover shot on the website.
It's true. It is. Yeah.
And in this one, very similar technique like you do in a lot of portraits or wedding stuff. I was like, hey, can you just kind of tug at the cuffs on your sleeve?
Yeah.
Nothing crazy. I'm not like, hey, do jumping jacks. It's just, hey, just kind of
try
tug on them.
Natural, what you would do,
Subtle, just adjusting your sleeve a little bit. And that's how you get, and then add in a look down to your left. But in combination with that, you get a very natural looking shot.
Yeah.
And it's just a very easy way to add things in. But it doesn't have to just be like those standard like wedding kind of shots. This shot of our friend Wyatt.
Yeah.
When we were out shooting up near Tim. I was like, hey, I need you to stand here. What I want you to do is just a couple times over, just raise your camera to your eye and lower it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just back and forth. And so then this is really just one of those in-between moments as he's raising or lowering. And I got that shot, like with that good smile, the emotion of it. And like, it looks natural.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like he's trying to hold it here and just like, frozen.
Yeah.
Because he's not. He's actually moving in this shot.
Yeah. Which this kind of makes me think, and maybe this is, I don't know, maybe I'm reaching. I don't know. Maybe this is not something you've ever thought about, but just in your photography, just in general, and then, you look on your Instagram page, you have that little tagline in your bio capturing this thing called life, right? And obviously that includes like, taking portraits in general, whatever. But I also think that it really kind of taps into the way that you take portraits too, because it's not like super stiff pose. Like that's how Wyatt is in real life. That is life,
Well,
you know? That
so-
is real life motion.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tangent. And I
Yeah.
think would make a good conversation for another episode.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
to your point, I think, and I didn't really think about this, but
Yeah, it just hit me,
You're right about
yeah.
this. Like, I say that because like this is just real life. You know, this isn't some like elaborate setup that we're doing. Like, I didn't have you get in some kind of like dress up or costume to
no.
take this. It's like literally you just wore this because that's what you wear.
Mhm.
We're out on some little adventure. I'm getting a shot of you.
Yeah.
That's life.
Yeah.
You know, it's not some forced image of yourself.
Yeah. These aren't like paid models or anything like that.
No,
and,
these
you
are
know,
literally all our friends.
Yeah.
We're just having fun.
But everybody in here, the way that these photos are taken, everybody looks like they could be models, you know? Like it's just
Yeah.
and I mean part you know, that just speaks to how good you are at doing this.
Sure.
So
yeah. But like, yeah, that's a really real thing. It's
Yeah.
like this is just who we are in real life.
yeah.
And it is, again, now I think about it's just another cool aspect of what I get to do.
Yeah.
I just get to capture you for who you are.
Yeah.
I love it.
And yeah, that's a super random little tangent, but
No, I like
it
it.
just kind of hit me. I was like, oh,
No,
That makes sense.
It's good for bringing it up.
yeah.
So there's another part of posing, you know, that it involves not just like making people look natural, but evoking some kind of emotion out
Mhm.
of your subject and kind of adding some kind of emotional element to the entire mood of the shot,
Mhm.
you know? And there's a couple really good examples here of what that looks like. The first one I'm going to bring up is another shot of you I've gotten.
Mhm.
And I love this shot of you. I think like you could almost say this looks like some kind of old timey, like, I don't know, thing. Like you're just like a little cowboy in a way.
Right? Yeah.
And the reason you get that vibe is because how you're posed.
Mhm.
A little bit with the lighting too, but like you're crossing your arms, leaning up against a wall.
Mhm.
And because I'm having you look down, you obscure the face a little bit, especially with the hat and the glasses. And
Yeah.
you'll notice like your eyes are obscured even more because the way the light hits the glasses,
Mhm.
there's reflection, so you can't see your eyes. But you're not smiling, so it's kind of more of a serious face. Obscure the face a little bit, and suddenly it's like not like a darker vibe, but it's like a cool vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know,
There's some
again,
mystery to it.
and combining that with the crossed arms leaning up against a wall, you look really cool in this
Yeah.
photo. And it's like, dang, who's this dude?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But like, you don't get that. Like, if I had you looking up in a way, you don't get that.
Yeah.
You know, especially if like I have you look up in this photo to your left, away from camera.
Mhm.
So I just see you like looking this way. Like I can't even see your face at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
There's enough of my face in this
yeah,
to tell enough of a story that it almost makes it more impactful than it would be if you saw my whole face.
yeah.
So
And so it's a way you can add something new to the photo
mhm.
that, you know, isn't there, but
Yeah.
like you can infuse a certain feeling into it.
Mhm.
Another good one is this one of our friend RB. And this a little bit has some to do with like the elements, and you know, he's got an awesome beard, which helps this photo as well.
Dude, I wish I could grow a
Yeah,
good beard.
but he's just got a good little adventure stare off into the distance,
Mhm.
you know? And the way you pose, like, because he's kind of kneeling down in this shot. And so his left arm is up like on his knee. If his
I was
his hand wasn't there, it's not the same kind of shot,
Yeah, no.
right? It doesn't have the same feeling. I think you can kind of see his camera there too a little bit. Maybe.
I
Yeah,
was wondering.
yeah, you can see his camera there. So like, if that stuff's not present, it's not the same kind of shot.
Yeah.
But you notice he's not looking at camera. He's not smiling.
No.
You don't have to have those things. You
Mm-mm.
know, you can create a mood in some other way. But he's looking off to the distance, and I tell him, hey, like look over like my right shoulder, or like, and I a lot of times, and you know this because you've been out with me when I'm shooting. I'll literally point like, I need you to look this way,
Yeah.
like out that way, and I'll point exactly where I want you to look. Did that with him. And then because of the angle I'm shooting at, and then again, kind of the conditions around, it was snowy. You can see some of the trees, the white in the back, like hints at you that it's snowy
Mhm.
and not like a clear blue sky day.
Yeah.
And obviously the clothing does that too. But like it just creates a certain vibe around this photo that like we're on some kind of little adventure
in the woods and stuff.
Yeah, he's cool, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how you create emotion with all this.
Yeah.
There's another good example here somewhere. This one of my little girl RJ. Again, same family as Stephen and Esther.
Yeah.
Good friends of ours back at home. I've done 2 family sessions for them, but this was right after one of them. She just like, hey, I want to do some photos. I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so I put my 50 on because I wasn't using that for the family shots. And I kid you not, she just did this on her own. I didn't prompt this.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey, maybe like hug the pole. And she gives me this face. And this face makes the photo.
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
Like she's not smiling.
Yeah.
But like something about it just draws you in because like the focus is really on the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, whatever, I don't even know what like mood this is. But like it just works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I don't know. Yeah. I don't
and
know
if I
either, but
had
it
her
does.
smiling, it's not the same.
Yeah.
If I had her looking away from camera, not quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example where, you know, no smile, almost just like dead stare right into the camera, just hits you.
Yeah.
And it looks really good.
It does. Yeah.
You know, again, this was not like totally my own setup. Like she just kind of did this.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's just an example of how you can really infuse certain kinds of emotions into your photos. So I think that's a pretty good spot to stop through at least these main concepts before we kind of go back through and review
Yeah. Yeah.
some of this. So I know there's a couple of photos here. I think we got 1, 2, 3, these 3 right here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through and kind of just talk about each one individually
Mm-hmm.
and bring out all the different aspects of what makes these portraits good portraits.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first one that I want to talk about, just because I think this is maybe the most obvious example. We have this photo here that you have of Gavin.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool adventure photo.
It's awesome.
He's holding a lantern.
Like this is one like, dude, you are an adventurer.
Yeah. And it's the way that it's shot, everything is just, it's so cool. It's a super cool image. But this photo is a really good example of how to kind of combine a lot of these different elements and these different concepts with portraits and stuff, and depth and light and posing and whatnot. Because this photo, you have the light from the lantern, so it's lighting his face. So you're getting all of that kind of. It's kind of side lit, but it's dramatic enough that it gives the photo a certain mood.
And it helps that this was shot like at night in the dark. Like there
in the middle
literally
of the
was
night.
no
Yeah.
other lights. So
Yeah.
like, one lantern's going to give you some really cool looking light.
Yeah. So there is that aspect. And then you also have this aspect of depth where the lantern's out of focus. The lantern's not super far from his face, but again, you're shooting this. I'm assuming this was on at 1.2. So you have really shallow depth of field. And so you're able to get only his face in focus, and you're able to leave that lantern as an out of focus, almost like a foreground element. It's not, but it kind of works as one.
Yeah, because he's holding it out in front of him.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's holding it here. He's holding it away from his body.
Yeah.
And so because it's just extended enough, like being as shallow as I was shooting the shot, like that becomes out of focus.
Yeah.
And the focus is just on his face.
Exactly. But it's in a position that you're able to recognize it as a lantern, which works really well with, lighting. It helps you kind of, it just kind of helps establish the scene a little bit more. If there wasn't a lantern visible here and it was just like the light on his face, it just wouldn't have the same feeling at all.
It's not the same.
So
yeah. And so like this, it pulls in all these 3 aspects, depth, light, and
it helps provide motivated light.
Yes.
So which
that's
is
perfect term.
Yeah. And that's a whole rabbit hole. But so there's, your depth and then your light. And then there's also the way that he's posed. He's holding that lantern out in front of his face.
A very typical normal pose you might have with the lantern. It's nothing unnatural.
Yeah.
But it works because like it's normal, but also allows you to get the right dramatic lighting.
Yeah.
And I think if I remember correctly, I think I was having him move the lamp around a little bit to figure out where the best spot was for that light in order to light it up like this.
Gotcha.
And so again, playing around with it in real time on the scene.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey, just put this here, take the shot, and I'm done. It's like, no, let's find the right spot. You know, moving it up and down, forward, back, side to side. Like, let's find the perfect spot for this light.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is just a good example of how to use all of these different elements and combine them into one photo.
Yeah,
so
I agree. And this was shot like over a year ago. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's right.
One of our first trips we did.
Yeah.
And like, in fun fact, like surrounding this shot, I mean, there's literally like 10 or 11 other people.
Yeah.
Like, they're just not in my frame, but they're around us.
Yeah.
We're by a campfire, and I'm like, hey, hold up this lantern. He's like, okay. And like, I'm just taking photos of him surrounded by the other people.
Yeah. And you would never know.
No.
So
you would think we're out in the middle of nowhere somewhere, like just us two or just him, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just a cool looking shot.
That's the what do they call it? The lie of photography for you.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yep.
Which is kind of a funny thing, you know, when you're doing like, you know, we do this with studio stuff, or like there was recently a Peter McKinnon thing on this, where they were talking about the lie of photography, and you go into a studio and it's just like cluttered with, you know, lights and umbrellas and things like that. But then when you take your photo, you're only in a tight little frame, so you get to block all of that out. So it's just finding those little frames. Okay, next one. I think we talk about this Parker one.
I think we need to.
Because this Parker one's phenomenal.
Yeah, this is also, it's so hard. When I look at all these, I'm like, I love all of them.
They're so good.
And a part of it's because it's all our friends.
Yeah.
And like, I love that aspect of it. But it's also like, I just love the way I shot it. And it's like,
yeah.
It's just so good.
It's really good.
And this one, I recently posted this one.
That's true.
And like, it's a good shot. And a lot of people like don't. This is another one too. Like, you see it, but you don't know like what we tried to do to get this one. You know, like I tried a lot of different things until I eventually found the right spot with my lens where I could get his, you know, kind of knees and hand out of focus. I got the glare on his lens, on his glasses, and he's looking off in a direction that just looks good.
Yeah.
But it's like, I had to play around with it. I had a bunch of bad ones.
Yeah.
You know, and he was sitting up in that tree, because you can't quite tell, but he's up in a tree, like, you know, 4 feet off the ground, maybe. Like, he was sitting up in that tree for, you know, a handful of minutes while I'm just playing around, looking stupid. But like, me looking stupid, playing around, gets this shot.
Led to an incredible photo. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. As my portrait apprentice, go through this shot.
Okay. So some of the elements that I see in this photo that are combined. First one I notice is depth. The way that he is framed, which this is kind of interesting because usually you don't shoot portraits from this low of an angle.
Yes.
So it makes it a little bit unique.
So let me talk about that real quick.
Yeah, please do.
So one of the things that I learned in watching Olivia shoot, and again, she does mostly like, you know, I guess like senior portraits, family stuff, weddings. And she's also primarily shooting at 35 millimeter, not 50. But for the most part, a lot of times you want to shoot more like at eye level or even slightly above, not below. And for whatever reason, I feel like somehow I get away with it shooting below relatively often. Like, not all the time, but somewhat often. And I don't know what exactly it is, but I feel like it does work. In very specific situations.
Yeah, you have to do it right.
Yeah, I think part of it is it's a little tighter than 35, because when you're wider and you're shooting low, you make people look like super tall and thin and distorted, and it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
But 50 is like a really good level of compression where it's not too much, but it's not like wide where it's going to look bad.
Yeah.
And so shooting low is okay, but it also gets back to posing and finding the right pose to shoot from a low angle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, just interesting. But yeah, so back to this. So depth. You're shooting low, you have his hand and his knees kind of out of focus, and they're acting as foreground elements. Which is something, you know, again, just always looking for anything you can to make, into foreground elements, whether it's bushes or whatever, or just the person you're shooting, using their own knees as a foreground element. So that's creating depth. And then there's almost like a leading line going up with his, the line, the side of his leg, into where the main focus point is, which is, obviously his face, which I think is super. I just barely kind of noticed that. And then the light's really good. Obviously, it's very side lit, very soft. I think the sun had barely set when you guys were taking those photos, right?
Yeah, it wasn't. I can't try to remember like the timing of this day. It wasn't like down.
Yeah,
but I think
it was behind the mountain, maybe.
Yeah, it went behind like the little hill that was there, and so like we did not have the direct lighting anymore.
Yeah.
But the sun was definitely still up.
Mm-hmm.
It hadn't gone fully down.
Yeah. This is a fun little night, by the way.
It was a good night.
It was a good night.
Yeah.
And then, you have him kind of looking out. An adventure-y kind of feel to it.
Yeah, but it's also like a casual adventure feel.
Yeah, it's not a forced adventure look,
No,
so,
it's very like I'm just hanging out.
It does. In
a tree.
Which I feel like is kind of Parker's vibe.
Absolutely.
He's just kind of hanging out. He's a very chill, dude. So
yeah, it's a fitting shot for him.
Yeah.
And it has, again, like a lot of those elements in it. So
yeah, I do like too that there's that glare on the glasses again.
I love when I found that, I was like, yes, that's what I want.
So, yeah, I think that's, there's the pose, there's the very relaxed but still adventure-y kind of pose, and then there's the depth. Obviously, lighting is good. It's very appropriate lighting, very soft. Yeah, that's kind of what I noticed in this photo. But
yeah, no, I agree. We got one more to go through, and I think this is a really good one to end on, and that's because
this is the one that started this conversation.
This is the one that started it all. Yeah.
So
when I don't remember where you were or whatever, but you got home and I had this up on my Lightroom, and you were just like, "Oh, come on, dude."
Yeah.
And then like I told you the story behind it and everything, and like. That's how this conversation started, and we had the idea for this episode.
Yeah.
So it's very fitting we
end on it.
One.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this photo. I don't know what it is about this. Well, I guess
first of all, it's Travis, and he's one of the best models you'll ever find.
That is true. Yeah. Such a stunning human being. Oh man. There's just out of every single thing about this photo, I absolutely love. Obviously, Travis looks really good, but then also just the colors, the tones, the way that the light is hitting the pole that he's sitting next to, the very subtle snowflakes that you see, like it just, everything about it just works so well. So to kind of break down, some of the different elements that are in this photo, we obviously have the depth. You're shooting between these two poles. Well, actually, first let's talk a little bit about the story behind this. Like, how did you come on to, because this is what I was asking. I was like, how did you just like see this? Because like this is something I would never. I couldn't totally figure out what he was doing at first, but I was like, I don't know what he's doing, but he looks cool doing it, So I was like, how did you find this out? So go ahead and tell the story about how you stumbled onto this frame.
Yeah, so we were downtown shooting some street photography. Me, Travis, and our buddy Ashton and his girlfriend Kaylee. And we were at a street corner, and it was a section, I believe, on Main Street where the tracks comes up the road. And he was sitting on the corner, kneeling down by that pole, waiting for the tracks to come to go through his frame for a photo. And I, at the time, when I saw this frame, like before I got my camera out to shoot it, I was like standing behind him. In a way, like, so like in this photo, like you're looking at him like to his on the left, like behind him there.
Gotcha.
And kind of like looking down at him. And for whatever reason, I just looked down. I'm like, oh, there's something here.
Yeah.
Because I saw like the poles. I'm like, I could shoot through those.
Yeah.
Like it's going to fit the frame right. And so he's sitting there waiting for tracks. And I go down like looking, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I let him get his shot first. I wasn't going to take him away from that.
Yeah. That's key, by the way.
Yes.
Let people get their shots.
Yeah. I let him get a shot. But then I was like, hey, can you quickly pose for this?
Mm-hmm.
And so after he had a shot, I was like, hey, just stay where you are. But what I need you to do is, one, obviously look back over your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
But two, I need you to like bring your arm down a little bit, your right arm, because initially it was covering his face like up here.
Yeah.
So it's like, I need you to crook your arm down a little bit because his camera's in his right hand up there.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to bring your arm down just a little bit so I can see your face. And after you reveal the face and have him look off in that direction, that with the foreground and the lighting and the conditions were helped too because it was lightly snowing.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes for a great photo.
Yeah.
And again, I just looked down like, oh, there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets back to that conversation we started this episode with, where for how much I've been shooting at 50 millimeters now, I see the world through this lens, this focal length.
Yeah.
And I know like, oh, I can get this and this in my frame. Like I can see that before I take it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can be walking out wherever, again, you've seen this many times when we've been out. And I'm like, hey, I need this shot right here.
Yeah.
But like, I haven't been over there yet.
Yeah.
Like I know that there's something there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just a matter of finding the exact right angle for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it just gets back to practice. It's like the more you try at it, the more you're going to see the world this way. And you just start to figure out how to introduce all these elements into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the story behind it. And it's a fun one. I do like it, especially because you're like, man, how did you do this?
I literally, like, I saw it and I was like how?
Yeah, and it's,
you know,
it's got that street vibe to it.
It does, yeah.
And like again, just the emotion of it. It's a good shot. I'm proud of it.
Yeah,
so
I would be too. Yeah, it's awesome. So, yeah, stunning stuff.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess in my story, I kind of went through all the elements of it. You know, it's got the depth.
Yeah.
With the posts, and then even his right arm is slightly out of focus, and it gets back to everything brings you up to his face.
Mm-hmm.
You got the kind of the natural motion. He's like looking over his shoulder, waiting for his target subject to come into his frame.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's like this feels natural. You know, it doesn't feel like he's posed or he's got something. You know, he's got something that you've told him to do or whatever. Even though you did tell him to do this, it looks like something he would already be doing because knowing that he's taking a photo, you know, he's kind of braced up against that pole. That just like, oh, obviously he would look like this. You know, he's taking a photo. So
yeah, it's capturing life.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and then you know, lighting's there and everything, and it's just everything came together for it. All right, we'll see how smooth that cut is because we just had a camera die on us while we're doing this, but luckily it was almost perfect timing.
Yeah.
But no, we're getting to a point now we can wrap this up, and this is long, but I think it's really good for people to hear. You know,
yeah,
because a lot of people want to shoot portraits, like you said, you yourself want to, and people struggle with it. It's hard, but it just takes practice. So there's a couple things that I think people should try out if they're shooting portraits. The first is to shoot portraits of your friends. And while that may sound a little silly, the reason I say that is because, like you see in all mine, these are all my friends.
Mm-hmm.
If people are, you know, the subjects for your portraits that, you know, you're friends with, they're going to be a lot more comfortable with you. And if you're telling them what to do, posing them, anything like that, they're not going to tense up as easily. You know, they're going to be relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
If you're shooting for strangers, they're like, what is this person doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like they have no reason to trust you.
Yeah.
They have no clue who you are. And so it's harder to set up good portraits with strangers. So go out and shoot with your friends. And like we go out all the time with groups of people. And, you know, a lot of times I just kind of try to take one of them away from the group for a minute to go shoot portraits.
Yeah.
And then we join back up. You know, it also, for me at least, it helps that people know I can shoot portraits like this.
It does. You built up a good enough portfolio now that when people are like, well, you've had people reach out who are like, hey, next time we go out, I need you to get a good portrait of me, you know?
Yeah. And you know, it's again, part of, you know, doing this for a longer period of time. But like, if I go ask someone like, hey, you want to go do portraits, they're much more likely to say yes because they trust me
Yeah.
to actually get good photos of them and make them look good.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't been doing that as much, it's a lot harder to do that. But that's where, like, use your friends.
Yeah.
You know, go out, have some fun one night. Be like, hey, can I just try some portraits? And don't play it off like, yeah, I'm a portrait photographer. Like just be like, hey, I'm just trying to get better at this. Can you just be a subject for me?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a lot easier to work with your friends than it is people you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I guess just for future reference for everyone listening, if you're out with me and you want to try shooting portraits, I will happily be a subject for you if you want to practice.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't need to get photos when we go out. I truly don't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to try and work on your game, let's do it.
Yeah.
You know, I'll gladly help you out a little bit and give you some tips or some ideas, and we can work on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I
That
think
kind of happened the other day, actually, when we were up, you know, we went out hiking a couple weekends ago, and you became everybody's subject.
yeah, which was very weird for me.
I would say I think that may be one of the first times that's happened to you, where you were like everybody's portrait subject.
Yeah,
So,
it was different, but you know, like, I'm happy to do that. Like, I'd rather you guys get a photo than me. I just don't care enough anymore.
Yeah.
And so if you want to work on your portrait game, let's do that.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, you know, reach out and let's get something on the books and go practice.
Yeah. You don't even need to go anywhere super crazy to do that either.
No,
You know?
and that's the nice thing for portraits.
Yeah.
You know, it's to get a good landscape, you kind of have to work for it a little bit.
Yeah. Location does matter.
You gotta,
So.
you have to drive, you gotta hike, something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
then you gotta hope for a good sunset or a sunrise. Portraits, I can shoot portraits in darn near any condition.
Yeah. Anywhere.
In almost any place.
You can take a portrait down here in the basement.
I have.
And yeah.
Check some of our product photos.
It's exactly. Yeah.
You know? So, like, you can shoot portraits anywhere, which is
Mhm.
one of the best things. And, you know, we've talked about it before, like, you know, we go out to places and, like, not a great sunset. Like, yeah, it kind of sucks. And I'm like, hey, it's overcast. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm shooting portraits.
Yeah.
Like, I can just switch like that.
Yeah.
So it's a great skill to have,
Yeah.
but you got to work on it. And, you know, we should plan things. If you guys want to go out and shoot portraits, let's go do it.
Yeah.
And only focus on portraits. Be fun.
I think it'd be fun.
I don't need to go hike 7 miles to go get portraits. Let's just go downtown or something. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to work that
I'm
hard for it.
Dying to go downtown, by the way. So I say we do it.
Yeah, it'd be fun to do that. So, there is another tip that I have for people. I guess before we move on, actually, there's one more thing, and this is more like, I guess, if you're doing some paid work in a way to get people to be more comfortable with you when you're shooting portraits. And I don't recommend doing this like crazy, but when you do have a good photo of someone, show them
Mhm.
in the field, like right after you take it.
Yeah.
And like kind of be excited about it. Like, yo, look at this shot.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what I do a lot of times. I take a photo. I'm like, okay, I know myself. I'm like, this is good. And I'm like, yo, check this out.
Yeah.
And then look at like, dang, that's sweet. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's shoot some more.
Mm-hmm.
But like my friend Olivia, I got to see this in person. You know, she's very happy and bubbly and fun. And she's taking photos of couples and all that stuff. And she's laughing and squealing and just like, oh, you guys look so good. You guys are so cute. And it's just, it's so fun and playful.
Yeah.
Like,
So you are.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's me. I'm fun and playful. Yep. But like in doing that, she creates a little bit of rapport with her clients.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she's showing the photos of them. They're like, oh, that does look really good. And like, it just helps everyone be a little bit more comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
And again, like when I'm out shooting, I show people and they're like, okay, like this is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, and like people start to think, okay, I could let him shoot some photos of me.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a good way just to build relationships with people,
Yeah.
you know, but again, don't overboard that because not everyone wants to see all your photos all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I only do that with portraits.
Yeah.
I don't do that with landscapes.
And
ever.
only with like a couple of them too.
Yeah. I'm
so.
not showing you every single one I did, but I'll show you like the one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
You don't want to annoy people. So.
Yeah. So that's the first tip. Go out with your friends. Have some fun with them.
Yeah.
Use them to learn. The second thing, and we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but is find a focal length you like and really work with that. you know? All right, so that was another malfunction in this episode. Making the third cut of this one. At least one of them might have been smooth enough. You might not notice while you're watching, but see if you can go find that one. But I think it's really just a sign that we're running a little too long. We need to finish up this portrait episode. So we're getting to the end here. But
the photo gods are not happy with us.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they're like, please shut up.
But we were just got into this idea of finding a focal length to really dive into.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I chose 50 millimeters. And I'm not saying you need to choose 50. 35 is great too. Olivia, my best friend, shoots on 35 almost exclusively. 85 is also a popular one too. You can find good focal lengths out there that, it's up to your personal taste.
Mm-hmm.
But in choosing one and trying to do more with that, like, it really does help you build an eye for portraits and just helps establish yourself in some kind of standard look or shot that you want to try and get.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good way to hone your skills a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'd recommend it. But you really should think about doing that because it will help you. It'll really train your eye to see, the world in the right way. Because I shoot a lot on 50. And if I'm not on 50, I'm on 15 to 35.
Mm-hmm.
That's my second lens. But I almost never shoot above 50. I have 70 to 200, but I almost don't ever use it.
Yeah.
And it's partly because I just have trouble seeing good frames with that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it because I shoot a lot on 50.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me, but you have to develop yourself in something worthwhile, So,
Yeah.
So get to it. And I think the last tip, and just kind of beat a dead horse here a little bit, but practice.
Yeah.
Practice really will make you a better portrait photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And a photographer in general. But as with anything you ever do in life, you have to just work at it. The more you do a certain activity, the better you're going to get at it. It's a 10,000 hours idea, right?
Exactly.
I haven't put 10,000 hours into shooting portraits. Again, I'm not going to claim I'm the best one. But for a lot of the people we do stuff with, I'm willing to bet I put more time in than almost everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so therefore, a lot of my portraits are going to be better than most people's.
Yeah.
Just the way it is.
Yeah.
But you just got to get out and do it, and we've talked about it all episode. There's a lot of ways you can practice with it. Go get your friends, try new things. Even if you don't know if it's going to look good, try it. And you take the photo and then you're like, yeah, that doesn't look good.
Mm-hmm.
But now, that doesn't look good and you won't try it again.
Yeah.
But you might tweak it. And that's what it's all about. I told you, I said a couple times this episode, I take a lot of the bad ones too.
Mm-hmm.
The ones where you're just straight on. It's I've taken those still.
Yeah. And you're always going to.
Yeah. I just delete them.
Yeah.
I don't keep them. I only keep and show everyone the really good ones.
Yeah. There's something to be said about being really particular and being a bit more picky, about the things that you're shooting and about the things that you're keeping. So
Yeah.
I think that helps weed out and kind of helps you find and focus on the better stuff. If you go out shooting and I do this all the time. I'll go out, shooting landscape stuff. I'll take 300, 400, 500 photos and I'll come back and I'll have 1, 2, maybe 3 that I'm like, those turned out solid, and it's the same thing I imagine with portraits with you.
Yeah.
So
now I will say, and we maybe talk about this a little bit too, and this could be a whole other conversation for an episode, but when you're starting out, shoot as much as you can.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Take it all, because that's how you're going to train your eye to see certain things.
Yeah.
But once you start to develop your skill, you have to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be much more intentional on what you're shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Now when I'm shooting portraits, a lot of times I'm like, okay, let's try this over here. Frame, I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
And I won't take a shot there because I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really looking for the one.
Yeah.
But I'm not going out and taking 100 portraits of one person in one spot anymore, even with all the little minor tweaks. I'm consciously looking for the right shot. And if I don't see it, I won't take it.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally I'll take a couple, but I'm very selective now with what I'm trying to take.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't want to just always flood your Lightroom with stuff, because now there's just
so much more to go through now.
Well, there's just too much going on.
Yeah.
Like, you have to weed through everything,
Mm-hmm.
and you can start to do a lot of that, culling process in the field without having to take the shot. If you're out there being intentional with it and knowing, okay, is this a good shot? No, it's not. And you know why.
Yeah.
But you have to start to understand why, and you can't get to that point until, as a beginner, you just take a bunch.
Yeah.
You got to learn what looks good, what doesn't.
Exactly.
So get out there and practice. But yeah, I think that's it. We don't want to piss off the photography gods anymore and have another malfunction on set.
I feel like we're on the verge of another one, so we better.
Yeah, we're going to have to cut this short.
Yeah.
But if you are listening to this episode on any of our podcasting platforms, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, you name it.
Yeah.
Please subscribe to our channel. It helps us out. If you're watching this video, which hopefully you are, because we showed a lot of photos in this episode, make sure you like this video. Subscribe to the channel, because that helps us out more than anything. And also leave a comment, especially something like this. If you learned something, like, what is something you picked up from this episode, especially if you're a non-portrait photographer, like, what can you implement in your own shoots that might help you out here, or if you are a portrait photographer and you think I'm just, full of it, like, what advice do you have? Because I'd love to learn.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to focus more on portraits. So, like, what can you teach me?
There's always room to learn.
Yeah.
So
Let's collaborate a little bit. So be sure to connect with us on all of our channels. And like we said before, if you want to get out and practice your portraits, by all means, let's do that.
I say we do it.
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
And again, I don't need to shoot. I'll be your subject, your willing subject. So let's get something on the books. Let's plan it. Let's get out, connect, have some fun. Bushwhackers out.